I ran the city's warming center out of an old church basement because the mayor wanted a photo op and not a plan. By midnight, we had 50 people down there, wet boots stacked like dead animals, bodies pressed together, everyone coughing in his sleeves. The city dropped off a pallet of thrift store blankets, a case of instant cocoa, and one sad box of hand warmers like that was a strategy. I had 2 teens from the rec center and a volunteer nurse. That was the staffing plan. I spent hours walking laps, breaking up little flare-ups over outlets and chairs, telling people to keep their shoes on, telling them to stop lighting cigarettes in the bathroom, telling them I didn't have more space because space wasn't a thing you could conjure. Cold makes people selfish and honest. You could feel it in every shove and every stare. The power went out at 1:12. Everything dropped into black, and you could hear the room breathe like one big throat tightening. Somebody shouted. Somebody else started praying. A kid started screaming and didn't stop. The generator caught after a long cough, and the lights came back dim and yellow, like the building was running on sickness. The furnace didn't. The vents stayed dead cold. I cracked the utility closet, hit the reset, jiggled switches I had no business touching, listened for any kick, any rumble, any sign the thing wanted to live. Nothing. So I did the only thing I could do without tools. I kept shoving blankets into hands until my forearms cramped, and I watched people wrap kids like burritos and still shake. Then dust started coming down from the ceiling. Not a puff. A steady sprinkle, like the building was shedding skin onto us. It landed on hair and eyelids and the cocoa cups. People wiped their faces and coughed harder. A woman with a toddler asked if it was mold. A guy near the door said the city was poisoning them. One of the teens held up his sleeve and it came away gray. I looked up and saw fresh cracks spidering out from the seams, thin lines that hadn't been there an hour earlier. The popping started too, little sharp snaps that made everyone flinch. I went upstairs to check the sanctuary because I couldn't stand guessing. The whole room felt wrong, like it was leaning. The roof beams were bowed, not a little. Snow had piled up on a flat section outside the stained glass, and it was sitting there like a loaded truck. Every time the wind hit, the wood groaned, and I felt it in my teeth. Dust puffed out of the beam joints like breath. I walked down the aisle, and the floor under my boots gave this soft, unhappy flex. I didn't need a degree to know weight plus old lumber equals bad news. I ran back down and called the coordinator. I told him the roof was sagging and dust was falling, and I wanted to move people now. He told me not to panic the guests. He told me to keep everyone in the basement because that's the safest. He said it calm, like the roof was a rumor and I was being dramatic. I pushed back and he started talking about procedure and liability, like we were on a Zoom call and not one gust away from a mass casualty report. He warned me that if I evacuated without authorization, the city wouldn't cover anything. It was such a clean, lawyer's sentence, and it made me furious. I hung up. Back downstairs, the dust got thicker. The popping got louder. People noticed. A couple grabbed their bags like they wanted to leave, then remembered there was nowhere to go. I didn't ask anyone's permission. I shoved tables aside and started pushing families toward the side hallway where the foundation walls were thick. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't under the wide span. I told the teens to take kids first and keep them low. The nurse started moving the fragile ones, the folks with canes and oxygen, and that 1,000-yard stare you see right before somebody collapses. People fought me because they were exhausted and cold makes you mean. One woman screamed that I was moving her baby away from the only spot that wasn't drafty. A guy with a beard full of ice called me a power-tripping bitch and said I was making everyone freak out. Another one planted himself in front of the hallway and said churches stand forever, like Snow cares about faith. I shoved past him. I kept moving bodies anyway because the ceiling didn't care what they believed. A man in a soaked parka grabbed my arm and yanked me back hard enough to twist my shoulder. He smelled like sour sweat and canned soup. He told me to stop, told me I was starting drama, told me I was going to get someone hurt. His fingers dug in like claws. I ripped free and shoved him toward the hallway too. He swung at me, missed, and slipped on the wet concrete. People shouted. Someone else tried to grab me to calm me down. I batted hands away and kept pushing because calming down wasn't the job. The roof gave with a sound like a huge mouth snapping shut. It wasn't a clean crash. It was a heavy slam, then a rolling grind like the building was chewing. Plaster and insulation dumped down the stairwell in one ugly wave. The air went white with dust and fiberglass. The lights flickered and half died. People screamed and coughed and dropped to their knees because you couldn't breathe standing up. Grit hit my eyes and burned like sandpaper. I pulled my sleeve over my mouth and shoved into the mess because the stairwell was the funnel and anyone near it got buried first. A folding chair rack tipped and pinned someone. I grabbed the metal frame and pulled. It didn't move. I planted my boot, pulled again, and my hand slipped on something wet. Blood or melted slush, I couldn't tell. The person under it kicked once, then went still. Another guy crawled in, face streaked gray, and we hauled together until the rack shifted enough to drag the leg free. The foot was bent wrong inside the boot. I didn't look at the face. I didn't want that picture living in my head. I heard a kid coughing in that stuck, choking way. I saw him near the stairwell, frozen like his brain shut off. I grabbed his hoodie and dragged him out. The fabric tore, and he almost slid out of it. His face was gray from dust. He kept opening his mouth like he wanted to cry and couldn't, just dry little gasps. I shoved him into the hallway and slapped his back until he puked foam and started pulling air again. He tried to stand, and his legs folded. I hauled him up anyway and pushed him deeper into the crowd so bigger bodies wouldn't trample him. People crawled over each other. Someone stepped on my hand and split a nail. I tasted blood and fiberglass and that burnt coffee flavor that never leaves. A woman kept yelling a name like a prayer and then went quiet, just coughing. The teens were crying and working at the same time, dragging kids by sleeves, lifting an old man by the armpits, getting shoved aside by panicked adults. The nurse crawled to someone who wasn't moving and kept trying anyway, pressing and shaking and refusing to quit, even when the person didn't answer. When the fire department finally got there, they had masks and lights, and they moved like the situation was real to them. Finally, they started hauling people out the side exit in clumps, hands on shoulders, pushing them into the night. Outside, the cold air hurt, but at least it wasn't full of fiberglass. People sat in snowbanks, coughing up gray spit. A kid cried without sound, like his throat was done. An EMT wiped blood off my knuckles, and I didn't even know I cut them. Afterward, the news called it an unfortunate structural failure. The coordinator stood in front of cameras and talked about community spirit. He didn't mention the part where he told me to keep everyone under the sagging roof. The next day, the city inspector handed me a citation for unauthorized evacuation procedures. I laughed in his face because it was either laugh or break something. He read it off his clipboard like a weather report and asked me to sign that I'd received it. He wanted my full name, my job title, my authority to act. He didn't ask how many people got cut up or how many kids inhaled fiberglass. He didn't ask who told me to keep them down there. That afternoon, I got an email asking for a timeline in 15-minute increments, and a second one asking who had approved the teens to volunteer, and a third one warning me not to speak to reporters without clearance. At the debrief, the coordinator talked about how panic behavior complicates emergencies, and he looked straight at me like he wanted to staple the whole thing to my forehead. 2 people's families called me because the hospital listed the church as the incident location and they couldn't get answers. I tried to tell the city who was responsible, and they bounced me between departments like I was a complaint about potholes. Every form had a box for root cause, and none had a box for you told us to keep them there. The horror wasn't the collapse. It was the paperwork that followed, trying to turn crushed people into an administrative inconvenience. The map pin blinked on my screen, and the caller kept breathing into the line like he was chewing air. I sat in a warm dispatch room with bad coffee and listened to a man freeze a mile at a time. He didn't give his name, just the address, twice, like saying it could nail the house to the earth. He said his wife collapsed in the kitchen. He said she grabbed the counter, slid down, and didn't get back up. He kept calling her name, then stopped doing that and started bargaining with me like I could change weather. I pulled up units. Every ambulance showed stuck, rerouted out. I refreshed the board like it would magically repopulate. I called fire. No answer. I called the private service. Their dispatcher said they'd already turned rigs around on the ridge and she wasn't sending anyone to die in a ditch. I called the deputy on the north end. He said the road drifted shut and his truck couldn't climb it. I told him to try anyway. He told me to stop fucking asking. The caller kept breathing shallow and fast. I asked if his wife was breathing. He said, "I think." Then he went quiet and I heard him slide the phone across tile. A chair scraped. Something metal clinked. He said the lights kept flickering and the house felt colder every minute, like the cold was inside the walls and now it had permission. I told him to look at her chest and count breaths. He said he couldn't tell if it was her moving or the whole room shaking from wind. I told him to put his ear by her mouth and listen. He did, and he said he heard one thin, wet rattle, then nothing, and it scared him worse than the screaming would have. I told him to check her neck for a pulse. He said his hands were numb. I told him to use the side of his fingers, press hard, don't be gentle. He tried. I heard him suck air through his teeth. He said her skin felt wrong, damn cold, not just cold. He said her eyes were open and he hated that, like she was staring past him at something else. He started moving again and I heard cabinet doors bang. He said he needed to get outside, wave, do something. I told him not to. He opened the back door anyway. The wind slammed the mic and turned my headset into a storm. He said he could see the porch light and nothing else. He said he took 3 steps and lost the house. Then he laughed once, ugly like his brain shorted. I told him to get low and crawl, find a siding, don't stand up. He cursed, and I heard him scrape along something hard, then a thud as he hit the wall. He said he was back at the house, and he couldn't feel his face. He got inside and started coughing so hard he gagged. He said the fireplace smoked out the room because the chimney iced over. He said he tried to crack a window, and the wind punched snow straight in. He said he slammed it shut, and now the whole place smelled like dirty smoke and wet wool. I asked if there was a carbon monoxide detector. He hesitated, then said it used to chirp, and he pulled the battery because it wouldn't shut the fuck up. He said that like he expected me to yell. I didn't. I just felt my jaw lock. I told him to kill the fire and get fresh air any way he could, even a tiny gap, even one window in one room. He argued like I was asking him to choose which way to die. He said if he opened a window, the heat would vanish and his wife would be dead anyway. Then he caught himself and said he knew how stupid he sounded, but his head felt full of cotton and he couldn't think straight. I tried to keep him talking because if he stopped, there was nothing between him and the dark. I told him to put blankets on her and get her off the tile if he could. He said he tried to lift her and dropped her, and the sound her head made on the floor almost made him puke. He said he grabbed her under the arms and she slid like sweat on skin, and his hands cramped and let go. He said he didn't want to touch her again because she didn't feel like her anymore. She felt like something left out. He whispered that he could hear knocking. I asked knocking where. He said not the door, the roof. Then it came through the line, soft at first, then harder, thunk, thunk like weight shifting above his head. He said the rafters were popping. He said the house was complaining, like it was tired of holding up winter. I pinged every unit again. No one could move. I got the same answers in different voices. Impassable, staged, down a ravine, out of service. I called highway. They said plows weren't running that stretch because they couldn't see the edge of the road. I called state police. They told me there was a travel ban and their troopers were stuck too. I called the deputy again and he said, "I'm not driving into a white wall for your call notes." I told him it wasn't notes, it was 2 people. He said he had 3 other calls stacked up and none of them were getting a miracle either, so I could stop acting like he was the bad guy. My supervisor walked by and said, "Document everything, like typing could warm a body." I snapped back without meaning to and asked him what else I was supposed to do. He said, "Flat, you stay on the line," and told me not to promise response times. That pissed me off more than the deputy, because it was true. All I had was my voice and a blinking pin. The caller's phone beeped a low battery warning. He said it was dying. I told him to plug it in. He said the power kept dropping and he didn't trust the outlets because one sparked earlier. He sounded drunk, not from alcohol, from cold and smoke and panic. His words started slipping. He repeated the address wrong, then corrected it, then asked if I was still there like I might vanish. I told him I was here. He said good, because when he stopped talking, he could hear the house too clearly. Every creak and pop and little tick of what like the place was breathing around him. The roof knocked again, closer, louder, and he went still. He said he heard footsteps up there. I told him it was snow, sliding, and ice shifting, normal, and I hated myself for saying normal. He said the sound moved in a line, like someone pacing. He started muttering at it under his breath like he didn't want to wake it up. Then he stopped mid-sentence and whispered. It answered. I asked what he meant. He said the knocks came back in the same rhythm. He just tapped on the counter without thinking. Then he said the hallway wall felt warm compared to the rest of the house. He said he pressed his cheek to it, and it almost hurt because everything else was so cold. He said he could feel a draft coming from behind it, like there was space in there. He said the wall's hollow, like he found a trick. Then I heard tearing, paper, gypsum, his nails scraping, and he swore because it cut him. He said he was ripping drywall, trying to get to insulation, trying to find anything that wasn't ice. I told him to stop tearing walls and focus on air, but he said the living room burned his throat and the hallway was the only place he could breathe. His breathing turned wet and rattly. He said his tongue felt thick. He said the hallway looked longer than it should. He said he saw a shadow move at the end of it, but he didn't know if it was real or his eyes glitching. He said he kept thinking if he sat down for 1 minute, he'd be done. I told him to keep moving, stamp his feet, slap his arms, talk to me. He tried. He said her lips were blue. He said he was sorry. He said he should have never moved them out there, should have never joked about getting snowed in, should have never pulled that battery. The battery warning chirped again, faint and desperate. Then he made a sharp noise, like something snapped. The mic scraped. He swore, and I heard him scramble. He said the ceiling in the living room just sagged, and snow dust fell through a crack like flour. He said the fire was burning wrong, roaring and then choking like it couldn't breathe. He said the knocking wasn't on the roof anymore. It was inside the walls now, like the house was settling around them, closing the gaps. I told him to get to an interior spot, away from windows, away from the fireplace. He said he couldn't feel his hands enough to hold the phone. His breath slowed like his body was trying to shut the whole problem down. He whispered he could hear the knocking again, right above him now, and then his phone made one last tiny beep. The line cut. I called back until my headset hurt. Straight to nothing. I typed the call notes anyway, because the system wants closure even when people don't get it. 2 days later, the storm broke, and I pulled the incident report. The deputy finally made it in with a snowcat. He found the husband in the hallway, half-dressed, fingernails torn up like he tried to dig through drywall. He found the wife in the kitchen where she fell. He wrote, "Unattended medical emergency," like that meant anything. I sat there staring at my own words on the log. Units unavailable, roads impassable, and felt sick because my job is to send help, and that night all I did was listen to a house turn into a tomb. I parked at the end of the unplowed road because my little sedan just spun. The patient's trailer sat right there, according to the last text, 2 houses past the mailboxes. In the blizzard, the mailboxes were just lumps. I sat with the hazards blinking and stared into nothing. Dispatch had pushed the call hard. The supervisor had done the usual guilt trick over text, the one that makes you feel like you're killing somebody if you don't go. I typed back that the road was trash, that the county hadn't plowed, that I didn't have 4-wheel drive. He sent a thumbs up and do your best. That's what they always say when they're warm. I stepped out to walk the rest. The wind hit my face and stole the air from my lungs. It didn't feel like cold. It felt like getting slapped with gravel. I pulled my hood tight and started counting steps like it was a game I could win, because if I didn't make it a game, I'd turn around and drive away and then have to explain why. 10 steps. 20. The world turned into white noise. My headlamp didn't help. The beam just lit up the snow in front of my nose like a curtain. I tried to follow the road edge by memory, but the edge wasn't there. Everything was flat. My boots sank, and every step grabbed at my calves. My footprints filled in behind me like the snow erased my mistakes on purpose. I kept checking my phone like an idiot. No bars. The battery dropped fast anyway. I texted the patient again, thumbs clumsy in the gloves. I can't see the mailboxes. What color is your trailer? Nothing back. That silence started to piss me off. You call for help, and then you ghost the person trying to get to you? Great. Perfect. I saw a propane tank shape and aimed for it as a landmark. I touched it, and it felt like touching a freezer shelf. Cold went straight through the glove. I turned to look for my car and saw nothing. No glow, no outline, just white. That's when my stomach sank. I told myself it was fine, that the car was behind me, that I just had to turn and go back the way I came. I started walking. I walked harder. I walked faster because panic makes you think speed is safety. The wind shoved me sideways. Snow hit my face so hard it made my eyes water. Then the tears froze at the corners and my lids felt crunchy. I tried to angle my body into it, but the gusts kept switching. I couldn't hear anything besides the roar. Even my own steps sounded far away, like somebody else walking in another room. My thighs burned. My lungs burned. My hands went numb inside my gloves like they weren't attached. I flexed my fingers and felt nothing. I couldn't tell if the gloves were tight or if my hand were swelling. I kept telling myself, just find a car, get in, blast the heat, call it in, go home, let someone with a truck handle it. Easy, but there was no car. Just blank. The scary part wasn't the cold. It was how fast my brain got stupid. Thoughts started slipping. I'd look in one direction, decide it was right, take 10 steps, then doubt it and turn again. I started doing that thing where you think you're moving straight, but you're actually making a circle. I knew that. I'd seen training videos. I'd listened to old guys talk about it like it was some funny, cautionary tale. It wasn't funny out there. My brain started doing dumb math. If I just sit for a minute, the wind can't chase me. If I kneel behind this drift, I'll block the gusts. If I rest, I'll get up. The thought felt calm. Too calm. Like my body was trying to sedate me. I caught myself starting to unzip my coat because I felt hot. That's the part nobody warns you about. Your body lies. It tells you you're fine right before it quits. I got the zipper down an inch, and this stupid little relief hit me, like finally. That scared the shit out of me more than the wind did. I yanked the zipper back up and bit down hard on my tongue just to feel something sharp. I punched my own sternum to stay awake. I yelled my own name into the storm to prove I still had a voice. The sound died 2 feet from my mouth. It didn't echo, didn't travel, nothing. Just swallowed. I slapped my cheeks until my face tingled, and then I couldn't tell if it was tingling or if it had gone numb again. I tried to call dispatch. 1 ring, then drop. I tried 911. Nothing. I held the phone up like a magic wand, turning in place, begging for 1 bar. The screen dimmed and the battery warning flashed again. Cold kills everything. I shoved it back inside my coat and kept moving because stopping felt like the start of dying. I hit something solid with my boot and almost fell. Wood. I dropped to my knees and scraped snow away with my forearm until my glove snagged on a fence rail. A fence meant property. Property meant a house. I grabbed it and started sliding along it, hand over hand, because the fence was real and it didn't move, and I needed something that wasn't lying to me. My glove stuck to the wooden spots. The rail sucked the heat out of my hand like it was drinking it. I kept going anyway. I told myself, follow the fence, it'll lead somewhere. And then another part of my brain, quieter and meaner, said, or it'll lead to nothing and you'll just collapse next to a fence like a fucking stray dog. I got angry. Not the big dramatic kind, just this tight rage that kept my legs moving. I thought about my supervisor asleep on his couch. I thought about dispatch safe in a building, telling me you're almost there like they could see through the storm. I thought about the patient texting directions and then going silent. I imagined getting found later and the report saying subject became disoriented, like it was a mystery. I wanted to scream. A porch light appeared like it spawned out of the snow. At first, I thought it was another hallucination. It blinked, vanished behind sheets of white, then came back steady. I stopped and stared until I trusted it. Then I ran at it like it was oxygen. I slammed into a door. Hard, shoulder first. I banged and leaned my whole body on it because I couldn't feel my hands anymore. I tried knob and my glove slipped. I hit the door again with my forearm and felt nothing but the impact in my bones. The door opened and warm air hit me so hard I almost cried. A man stood there with a shotgun low and steady. He stared at my uniform badge and still didn't lower it. He looked past me at the storm like he expected more people to follow. I shoved my ID toward him with shaking fingers. I tried to explain, and my teeth chattered so hard my words fell apart. I could barely get out that I was working. I got turned around. I needed warmth. He didn't say much. He just stepped back enough for me to stumble in, and he kept the gun in his hand like that was normal in a blizzard. He pointed at a chair by a space heater. I sat and held my hands out in front of it. My fingers were white at the tips, then blotchy, then this nasty purple like bruised fruit. The pain didn't show up right away. It waited, and then it hit in sharp stabs like my skin was getting punished for leaving blood out in the cold. I sucked air through my teeth and tried not to make noise. Pride is stupid. Pride almost got me killed out there, and it was still trying to act tough in front of a stranger with a shotgun. I asked for a phone. He shook his head and pointed to the window like, "Look outside. What the hell do you think we're doing? Running errands?" I tried my own phone again. No bars. Battery at 5%. I kept tapping the screen anyway, like persistence would summon a signal. Then my stomach flipped. Hard. I leaned forward and threw up into his trash can because my body didn't like the heat coming back. It felt like something inside me unclenched all at once, and the nausea rushed up. I wiped my mouth with my sleeve. I hated myself for it. I hated that I'd walked into a stranger's house and puked like a drunk. He didn't react, just stood there listening to the wind slam his siding. I tried to ask about the trailer. I got out 2 houses past, and he cut me off with a look that said not tonight. He kept glancing toward the door like the storm might knock again. I realized he wasn't watching me because he thought I was dangerous. He was watching because he knew what happens when people get lost out here. They keep walking until they can't, and sometimes you find them too late, and sometimes you don't find them at all. My shivering slowed after a while, which scared me more than the shaking. I kept moving my feet, tapping my toes, rubbing my arms. I forced myself to sip water. I forced myself to stay awake. The heater dried my nose out and my lips cracked, but I didn't care. I just needed my brain to stay mine. When the sky finally turned that dirty gray, the wind eased enough to see shapes. The man set the shotgun on a table like he decided the night was over. He handed me gauze and an old jar of ointment without a word. He wrapped my fingers like he'd done it before. I sat there letting a stranger bandage me, and the whole time I kept picturing that zipper sliding down, that sweet relief, that lie. In the morning, we walked outside together and found my car 15 yards from his porch, half buried, invisible at night. 15 fucking yards. I stood there and stared at it like it was a joke somebody played on me. 15 yards meant I'd been right there. It meant I'd almost laid down and died, basically on his front lawn, because I couldn't see, because I panicked, because my body convinced me sleep would feel nice. The man didn't say, "Told you so." He just turned back toward his door like this was how winter worked and people never learned. I drove home with my fingers wrapped in gauze and kept thinking about that moment. I started unzipping my coat, smiling like sleep sounded good. The storm didn't need a monster. It just needed me to make one bad, comfortable choice.